Let me ask you something uncomfortable. What if the thing you've been afraid of your entire life, the judgment, the criticism, the watchful eyes of everyone around you, what if none of it was ever real? What if you've been performing for an audience that walked out of the theater years ago? Because here's the truth that will either devastate you or set you completely free, depending on how ready you are to hear it. Nobody is thinking about you. Not your coworkers, not your neighbors, not the people who watched you stumble giving that presentation, not the strangers who saw you trip on the sidewalk, not even most of your friends, at least not in the way you think. They're all too busy thinking about themselves. And the day you truly, deeply bone-level understand that, everything changes. We are born into performance. From the moment we take our first steps, there are eyes on us. Parents clapping, family members watching, teachers grading, peers judging. We grow up in a world that seems to revolve around observation. And so our brain, brilliant and adaptive as it is, builds an assumption. Someone is always watching. Psychologists call it the spotlight effect. It's the deeply human tendency to believe we are at the center of other people's attention, that our mistakes are cataloged, that our bad hair days are noticed, that our failures are remembered. But here's what the research actually shows, and what your own experience will confirm if you're honest with yourself. People are not watching you. They are watching themselves, in the reflection of every conversation, every room, every interaction. Every single person you have ever met is the main character of their own story. And in their story, you are a background character, an extra, a face in the crowd. Think about the last time you walked into a room full of people and felt everyone's eyes on you. Now think, when was the last time you spent more than 30 seconds thinking about how someone else walked into a room? You don't. Because you can't. You're too consumed with your own entrance, your own appearance, your own anxiety. And so is everyone else. The audience you've been performing for, it was never there. Now sit with that for a moment. Because before the freedom comes, the grief. If no one was ever really watching, then what have we been doing? How many things did you not do because you were afraid of what people would think? How many dreams did you quietly bury because you imagined the laughter of invisible critics? How many times did you shrink yourself, dim yourself, edit yourself for an audience that wasn't even paying attention? How many versions of yourself have you killed to please people who forgot about you the moment you left the room? That's the weight. That's the invisible chains. The life unlived in the shadow of imagined judgment. You didn't start that business because what would people say if it failed? You didn't speak up in that meeting because what if they think you're stupid? You didn't wear that outfit, take that trip, ask for that promotion, say I love you first, because somewhere in the background of your mind, the audience was watching and waiting to disapprove. But they weren't. They were at home, worrying about their own business, all lying awake at night, anxious about their failures, editing their words, shrinking their dreams. The prison was always unlocked. You just didn't know it. So, what happens when you finally accept it? What happens when the realization moves from your head, where it's just an interesting idea, down into your chest, where it becomes something you feel? You stop performing, and the moment you stop performing, something extraordinary happens. You start living. You start doing things because you want to do them, not because they'll look good to others. You start dressing for yourself, speaking for yourself, building for yourself. The fear of public failure dissolves because you realize there is no public. There is no committee reviewing your choices. There is no panel of judges scoring your life. There is only you, your decisions, all and their consequences. And that is terrifying to the ego and electrifying to the soul, because now the only standard you have to meet is your own. And your own standards, free from the distortion of what others might think, become something much more honest, much more personal, much more achievable. You stop chasing the life that looks impressive and start building the life that feels right. That is liberation. That is what's on the other side of this realization. But there's another layer to this, and it's harder to swallow. If no one is coming to save you, then you have to save yourself. If no one is responsible for your happiness, then you are responsible for your happiness. If no one is obligated to validate your choices, cheer your progress, or notice your growth, then the question becomes, are you doing those things for yourself? This is where real self-care begins. Not the kind sold to you by social media, the face masks and bubble baths and treat yourself culture. The real kind. The unglamorous, demanding, deeply personal kind. It's asking yourself, am I making choices based on what I actually want, or based on what I think I should want? It's noticing when you're people-pleasing and asking what you actually need. It's building habits, boundaries, and a direction in life that answers to you, not to the imaginary crowd in your head. Because here's the hard truth. When you're constantly performing for others, you stop knowing yourself. You lose track of your own preferences, your own voice, your own desires, because they've been buried under layers of what will they think. When the performance ends, you have to meet yourself again, sometimes for the first time. And that meeting, It's the most important one of your life. Now, this is the paradox that most people miss. This is actually when you start truly connecting with other people. Because when you stop performing, you stop attracting an audience. And when you stop attracting an audience, you start attracting allies. The people who were drawn to the performance, the mask, the curated version, the carefully edited highlight reel, they drift away. And good. Because that connection was never real. It was a transaction. You performed, they applauded. The moment the show stopped, there was nothing left. But the people who stay when the performance ends, the people who show up for the real, unpolished, uncertain, genuinely you version of yourself, those connections are built on something that cannot be manufactured: truth. You cannot fake your way into deep relationships. You cannot perform your way into genuine intimacy. At some point, you have to take the mask off and trust that what's underneath is enough. It is. It always was. But you'll never discover that as long as you're too busy managing everyone's perception of you. So, here's where we land. You are not the center of anyone's attention. The audience was never there. The critics you feared were always just echoes of your own insecurity. And now that you know that, what are you going to do with it? Stop waiting for permission. Nobody is coming to hand it to you. Stop waiting for applause. It was never going to come from out there anyway. Stop waiting to feel ready, to feel validated, to feel like enough. You already are. You just couldn't see it through the noise of all that performing. The realization that nobody cares, truly absorbed, truly integrated, is not a sad ending. It is not loneliness dressed up in philosophy. It is the most powerful beginning available to a human being. It is the moment you stop living for a story that was never yours to begin with and pick up the pen. You are the sole author of your life. Write something worth reading. If this hit you somewhere real, don't just let it sit here. Take one thing, just one thing you've been putting off because of what someone might think. One conversation you've been avoiding. One dream you've been quietly apologizing for. One version of yourself you've been hiding, and take one step toward it today. Not tomorrow, not when you feel ready, today. Because here's what I know about you. You didn't stumble across this video by accident. That's something in you was already ready to hear this. Something in you already knew. So if this spoke to you, share it with someone who needs permission to stop performing. You might not know exactly who needs it, but you probably feel who needs it. Subscribe if you want more of this. Honest, uncomfortable, necessary conversations about becoming who you actually are. And drop in the comments. What's the one thing you've been holding back on? Say it out loud. Even typed on a screen, there's power in naming it. The day everything changes doesn't have to be some distant moment. It can be right now. It can literally be today.